This is a read of Zensuon Crystal Age, Chapter 2, A Great Day for a Swim, where our dastardly duo, or duo of disaster, battles strange cloaked men of cloth, metal, and wood. Nuraka's hand hit the edge of the boat to a loud thud. Mika watched in confusion from the other side of the boat near the edge. It wasn't that far, close enough to hear each other shouting over the cacophony of fading screams from the uncounted passengers as they ran away from the charging orc. Wait, why was Nuraka charging at him? That orc just pushed from his end of the boat to end me? Mika tried to parse his trail of thought as the green giant charged at him, the creature's eyes burning with primal rage and an axe in hand that, for all purposes, could be described as Mika-sized. Unfortunately, the only series of thoughts that came to his head was rather blurry. They were very grim and very bloody, not his favorite kind at all. Why? Did he think I tried to attack him? Should I speak? No time for that. It'll be over me before I even make the first syllable heard. Still yet, Denon? What good is all your advice now, old man, if I'm about to die? As Mika finished that final thought, Nuraka leapt and landed with a Mika's eyes glazed, stared at Nuraka's boot, smashing the head of the hooded figure that barely peeked from the side of the boat, not a step away from where the halfling was standing. Splinters started flying everywhere as the wooden head was smashed, and with another leap from there, Nuraka was flying, although one might say very rapidly descending, toward the small four-man boat where another hooded figure was staring. Who knew if, or what, bits of wood, metal, and glass might think to themselves, witnessing a massive axe coming down upon them from the heavens. But the best of blacksmiths, carpenters, and glassworkers would likely say it is a singular word. Fuck. Mika cringed looking down at the massacre as both the hooded men? No, constructs or golems likely, and the boat that crashed into the canal's water, obscured by a giant splash. Nuraka disappeared with them. Only the rope still hooked to the ship floated among the floating pieces of wood. Golems. Golems are made to look like people, but made of stone, metal, or really anything that magic can move through. It's debatable if they are or not, in the sense people are, that is, and so most people made them constructs, either as deep social commentary that they are made in the mind's eyes of man, or just because they're usually made of construction material. Nuraka! Nuraka! Mika shouted. The cries of the others among the deck were no more, as all other visible passengers disappeared from sight, likely going below, which was the smart move, Mika considered, as the ship continued on course and the rubble was left behind with no sign of the greenskin. Mika stopped to think, something that seemed to separate him from the now drowned orc. The attackers are gone, the orc is gone, and I'm back to square one. All I have to do now is get into the city and get lost so no one would be able to track me. A massive splash surged outward from the surface of the water. It was the orc. Immediately swimming toward the rope now floating just out of his reach, Mika thought. He's resilient, the halfling added in his mind, as he stood atop the barrel starting to whistle, and in turn, the wind began to whistle. The rope, which was limply hanging in the water just out of the orc's reach, began to be pushed and shoved, thus teased and yanked by sporadic and lashing bursts of air. The air tugged the heavy rope slowly toward the rushing Nuraka, as the orc finally clasped his hands around the wet rope and started pulling himself up. Wet ground accompanied his ascension toward the ship. Mika stopped his whistling, smiling. In turn, the wind stopped its own whistling and possibly smiled back, at least for those who knew where to look. The orc shoved its drenched self onto the deck, smelling like a wet dog, which made Mika wonder if he was wearing any dog as part of his hide armor. Then wonder why he was standing so close to it, that is, him, thus taking a step back. Great work, although you could do with a bit of forethought for your actions. I would even settle for a smidge of an afterthought. The halfling chuckled, sitting on his barrel as the brown eyes of the orc Lerde gazed down on Mika, and a water-spraying grunt echoed out of Naraka's mouth. Mika smirked and glanced around the empty deck, ensuring no one was to be found before turning his blue eyes back to the orc. I'm just making sure you know it was me who saved you. You didn't think the rope just dangled out of the water on its own, did you? Naraka, in turn, just stared. Can you even grasp what I did? Do orcs even have a concept of magic? Mika considered, but he did not seem to have long to do so. Was it an explosion? 2. The halfling's thoughts ran ahead of him as the ship suddenly saw 2 pillars of water flanking it near the low mast height from the canal around it. The water eruption and slowly recoiled. The blasts from below were loud, lingering, and worst of all, heaving the boat just slightly from side to side to make the seasickness start to develop deep in your mind more than in your stomach. It also left a small shower of the canal's water. That is to say that the water that was shut up now began to rain down. And with it, wet the relatively dry Mika, alongside further drenching the already dripping Naraka. Naraka was glancing around like a wild animal, looking for its prey, bringing the axe dangerously close to his ear as if he was already ready to cleave someone. Mika stopped. He listened through the drops, hearing the hubbub below rise and move like a wave, trying to hear what sounds and where were coming from within the ship the best he could. Not many could do so. Of course, most of them did not have the halfling's handle on wind and its vibrations. Mika did not have time to smile satisfaction at that fact. He turned to his hound, the orc, he obviously meant, and pointed him to the door leading to the bows of the ship. The explosion came from below. I could hear the people inside panicking. The ship is sinking. This is a perfect time to get to the emergency sailboats before anyone There he goes. Mika's head tilted from left to right as Naraka rushed past him, stopping just short from kicking down the door, showing the orc has mercy for at least some wood-based things, and pushing his way down to the ships below. At least he's consistent. A good trait to know about if I'm going to have him as a guard. The halfling thought with a smile, already turning in his head new old lines his father would use to win over a stubborn customer. So he did. He found himself following the orc to make sure he could use the vividly remembered lines on it before the grin scheme gets itself killed. The orc was taking the frontal shoving position, and while usually you'd think a panicking crowd has the upper hand when it comes to these things, one should stand never in the way of a charging orc. Violence isn't always the answer, but it was in this case. Mika wasn't for it, but it wasn't him doing it, right? What could he do to stop the orc? Not much for what he tried so far. And besides, once people realized the danger was inside with them, in those narrow ship's corridors, they made sure to make their way in quite a hurry to the opposite way of the orc and halfling. Much to Mika's dismay, who knew that if this was going to take much longer, emergency sailboats might have to be replaced for floating debris. First came Naraka, knocking people across the face. Serves them right for ravenously trying to shove the pharaoh-looking orc to get out and save their lives. Everyone who dared be so selfish found a smack delivered onto them from one of the orc's proud shoulders, equipped with what were hopefully animal parts of them, so you know they were proud. Behind him waltzed the halfling, walking across the ship's interior like it was a sunny day at the beach, even if the interior was what you'd call less than spacious. Mika being sizably variant from humans, as people would call it nowadays, had an advantage in this terrain. And use that advantage the halfling did, as he followed the orc deeper and deeper into the bowels of the ship. He only stopped once his leg hit water, and the two glanced down at his foot, and then forward and way too upward at a door that seemed to threaten even the greenskin in size. It was something that you'd not normally found in the bowels of the ship. It looked like it belonged in a warehouse or perhaps a mansion, although in Mika's eyes maybe more like a poor man's mansion. Naraka, obviously not being deterred by wood or metal, the latter seemingly the material of the door, swung his axe and engaged the threshold head on in vicious battle, which Naraka lost. The axe vibrated in horrid polyphonous sounds, which caused the halfling to wince, but didn't much dent the massive doors. Though, if it was a mansion, you would be certain a butler would already be here with all the ringing going on through his ears. What are those doors doing on a ship? More importantly, Mika looked at the orc. What is he going to do now? To Mika's surprise, Naraka looked at him, as the orc put the axe on his shoulder and the blade by his ear. Step aside, Mika grinned. This was his chance to get the orc under his belt. The orc did, glancing with his dim brown eyes at the halfling as Mika came down to the watery floor, wetting his legs up to his knees in contrast to the orc merely getting his feet slightly soaked. He could see it more clearly now without the wet green man in the way, and he knew the lock. It was the new Hirschfield Goldstein model? Those were just in construction when I fled. What's going on? Naraka grunted. Mika snapped back into attention, nodding and looking as if he was merely deep in contemplating thought about the situation, which, given, he was. Pull me up, Mika started, and then added, gently. As he saw that, indeed, Naraka followed his gentle command. The green man pulled up the halfling and toward the lock itself where Mika pointed. The orc knows to go where it is pointed. It is at least as good as a hound at this point. As the halfling leaned down, he furrowed his brows, putting his mouth before the lock, taking a deep breath, and out came the air. He could feel the resistances, where they were stronger, where they were weaker, the shapes, the sounds the wind make against the metal. For a moment, he recalled his father, his tutors. He thought this was nothing but a collection of ancestral party tricks to show dinner guests until he realized it was much more once he became part of the business. Safes and gems, father always said. We sell them the valuables and then offer a way to guard it, but we always keep the way to break it. Click! Mika gave a short laugh. Fortunately for him, the HG1 wasn't as good as Goldstein thought it to be. Put me down, Mika slowly recalled from his deep thoughts, but quickly enough to add, gently. Naraka put him down on the floor. The halfling hopped to the side. The orc pulled up his axe. Mika pulled out his sling. The duo came crashing in.